My name is Marina Vale, and at 33, I've learned an odd skill how to disappear in rooms full of people who love the idea of me more than the person I am. We grew up on a quiet street outside Providence, 2 maples, a shingled house, the smell of floor polish. My father Patrick ran guidance at a public magnet school. My mother Eliza staged homes for real estate photos. Presentation was our family sport. If it looked right, it counted. I love numbers because they didn't care whether you smiled while you solved them. I left for a state university on scholarship in applied math. 2 years later, my sister Lena followed Light, instead of Line's Conservatory in New York, on a dazzling audition and a home equity line. At 8, she turned our living room into a stage. If she needed a lighting tech, I stood with a flashlight. The arrangement felt natural, then I made things work. She made things shine. They were never rich, but they were good at the pose of being fine. That pose cracked the year the district reimagined leadership structures and offered Dad a soft exit with a thin check. Real estate slowed. Mom's commissions dried up. They called it a lull. I learned what lull meant during a winter visit. While my parents picked up chowder, I plugged my phone in at Dad's desk and found a stack past due mortgage notices and intent to accelerate a tax bill highlighted in orange. Beneath it lay a letter opener on a schedule of minimum payments, the circles so dark the ink bled through. Another envelope waited in Lena's looped handwriting. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. It took me 3 minutes to log into my credit union and push $4,000 into Dad's account. I labeled it Winter Fix, then stared at the euphemism until it emptied of meaning. The next morning, Dad mentioned a bank glitch that had corrected itself. I swallowed the correction and flew back west through sleet and relief. What begins as a one-time kindness becomes a spreadsheet. I created a tab called Home with columns for mortgage taxes, utilities, repairs. I set an automatic payment $900 at first, then $1,100 when assessments rose, then $14 when the water heater died and the roof shed shingles. Months stacked into years, and the total crept toward $80,000. The money left my account like tide, regular, unremarked, unstoppable. I didn't tell them it was me. Partly to protect their pride. Mostly because the family story worked better if Lena, the luminous one, was the provider. It fit the narrative my mother had monogrammed on the household like towels the artist ascends. The practical child is fine. The narrative spread. At birthdays, Mom would say, "We're lucky Lena's bookings are steady. She keeps an eye on us while arranging olives as if abundance were a craft project." Dad nodded and changed the subject to the producer's assistant, who had remembered Lena's name. Meanwhile, Lena posted golden hour photos from rooftops with captions about grind and gratitude. If she sent money, it never hit the ledger that mattered. Whenever resentment bubbled, I ladled it back with logic. "No one asked you to do this, Marina. They raised you. You can spare it. It's temporary." Temporary lasted 6 years. Sacrifice has texture. Mine looked like a studio in a 1960s walk-up with a heater that rattled when the bus passed a couch from Craigslist vacations postponed to later. It sounded like cheap coffee at dawn, before markets opened, sending money across 3 time zones to keep a house I didn't live in. I turned the habit into notes to make it feel chosen. A per P 500 car repairs. Jewel tax hike, SEPTI new fridge bulk transfer. A ledger can feel like control when everything else refuses to be counted. Lena's career did what early careers and performance do. Waitressing background work, a voiceover that ran at odd hours, and a string of almosts polished into anecdotes. A pilot filmed in Queens gave her 3 lines and a blurred silhouette. In the family chat, Mom sent 15 exclamation points and a photo of a bouquet. The worst part of being invisible is how normal it becomes. During my monthly calls, Mom asked about the firm, the way you ask about weather in a city you'll never visit. I mentioned a promotion. She pivoted to Lena's table read. Dad tried, then trailed off. I told myself they were tired. I told myself many things. The text that set the evening in motion arrived on a gray Thursday while I built a deck for our investment committee. Family dinner Saturday. Lena got a recurring role. Be here by 5. Mom. No question mark, just the address, as if I still lived down the block instead of a flight away. I stared at it, then added a sticky note shift flight. Finished deck Friday, dry clean blazer. Saturday morning, I presented in a navy suit to a room that smelled like lemon cleaner and old money. The committee approved the strategy I shepherded for 9 months. My boss clapped my shoulder. In the elevator, I checked the time, grabbed the suitcase from under my desk, and headed for the airport. The flight east was smooth and full of sleeping strangers. I read notes on our small cap exposure and did not think about kitchens or watches, or how long a person can pay for a story without becoming part of it. By late afternoon, the rideshare turned onto my parents' street. The maples were taller, the cedar hedge trimmed into military precision. There were more cars than I'd expected my aunt's hybrid. A compact SUV I didn't recognize, the dented sedan that used to belong to my cousin before his second baby. Laughter spilled from the front windows, my mother's high trill, my father's low rumble, another voice carrying the bright confidence of a person who knows the room is tilted in her favor. The new front steps were stone instead of peeling wood, the kind of upgrade that doesn't look like survival until you know the invoice. My suitcase wheels bumped the stone. I smoothed my blazer, felt the outline of my phone where the banking app sat one tap away, and caught myself. Not tonight. I told the part of me that measures. On the porch, a faint scatter of glitter clung to the welcome mat aftermath of some earlier celebration. A delivery slip was taped to the mailbox, florist. 11:30 a.m., signature E. The house hummed with music and dishes, and a dozen conversations braided together. I paused with my hand on the railing, the air sharp with late autumn cold, and the possibility of yet another evening at the edge of the frame. I tightened my grip on the handle of my bag, climbed the last step, and reached for the doorbell. The bell never had the chance to finish its chime. The door swung open on a swell of music and oven heat, and my mother's voice, 2 keys higher than usual, poured into the doorway. "Marina." "You cut it close," Eliza said, kissing the air near my cheek, as if even contact might crease the scene she'd arranged. Coat on the rack, suitcase by the stairs. We're plating in 10. Beyond her shoulder, the living room looked brighter and more curated than my memory. New linen curtains, a low walnut coffee table, a rug with an abstract pattern like storm maps. The old sofa had been replaced by something sleek and mid-century with legs that made the vacuum easier. A small floral arrangement sat on every flat surface. Someone had dimmed the lamps to a warm glow. Someone had decided this was what celebration looked like, and then made it so. "Look who finally made it," Lena called from the center of the room. She stood in a crescent of attention. Our Aunt Sloane, 2 cousins, Mia and Theo, and my father, hovering with a bottle of Pinot like a stagehand waiting for his cue. Lena's hair had been blown into obedient waves. A thin gold chain caught the light when she turned. Her laugh landed on the room, and everyone leaned toward it. My father Patrick crossed the distance and wrapped me in an embrace that smelled faintly of starch and red wine. "There she is," he said, holding me a beat too long, as though holding on fixed anything at all. When he pulled back, his eyes skated to the suitcase. "You came straight from the airport." "Straight from a meeting to the airport," I said lightly. "Hi, Dad. We were on the verge of sending a search party." Aunt Sloane chimed in, a diamond tennis bracelet winking at her wrist. Sit. You must tell us everything about What Is It fund rotations." I opened my mouth, and Lena's voice sounded again, bright and sure. "You can corner her later, Auntie. Come meet Jonas." A man rose from the arm of the sofa where I hadn't seen him. Tall, clean-shaven, the kind of face whose features were arranged by an architect, neat, intentional. He offered his hand. "Jonas Hale," he said. "I work in corporate finance for a media company. Lena says you speak fluent numbers." "Marina," I said, and took his hand. His grip was firm without being performative. He looked me in the eye when he spoke a small thing. But in this house, small things had meaning. "Jonas is the one who understands my call sheets," Lena said, half teasing, half planting a flag. "Finally, someone at dinner I can talk about budgets with who won't yawn. Only if someone else handles the adjectives." Jonas said, a flicker of humor. Then to me, "Lower." "Congratulations on surviving an end-of-week committee. I always feel like I need an IV afterward." A laugh escaped me before I could help it. "You and me both." Eliza clapped once. "All right, stars." Rolls on the platter, napkins folded. "Marina, darling, could you carry the salad?" We're 5 minutes from a standing ovation. I followed her into the kitchen and stopped. The room had been rewritten dove-gray cabinets with shaker fronts, a farmhouse sink deep enough to bathe the Labrador-veined counters that caught and reflected every watt of light. The pendant lamps over the island were the kind you see in aspirational magazines that never show anyone chopping onions. The old scuffed floor had been replaced with a honeyed hardwood that whispered wealth in a language it didn't intend anyone to translate. Eliza caught me glancing and smiled satisfied. "It finally looks like itself, doesn't it?" "It's beautiful," I said. The words were true and also heavy. "That backsplash," she said, touching the tile as if it were a friend's cheek. Lena insisted. She said cameras love texture. I said, lifting the bowl. The salad glistened like a meadow after rain. She appraised me with the quick up and down that had been my mirror for decades. "You could have worn color," she murmured. "Black is so office. And you work too much. It's showing in your face." "I came straight from work," I said. "I did a thing I'm proud of today." "That's nice, dear." She swiveled to the oven. "Tongs are in the second drawer." My father slipped in the empty wine glasses cradled like fragile birds. He met my eyes, and something like apology flickered across his face, then vanished. "We're ready," he said to Eliza, not to me. We moved like a rehearsal salad to the sideboard bread to the basket plates along the runner. Through the doorway, I watched Lena narrate a story with her hands. She was miming a fall, slapping her palms the way stunt teachers do, and my cousins howled. Jonas watched her with an expression I couldn't place. Admiration, yes, but also a measuring. He was adding columns, not simply receiving light. At the table, places had been assigned by invisible logic. Lena took the chair at the narrow end near our parents. On either side of her sat the people most likely to say, "Tell us more." I found myself across from Jonas, and between Theo, who was texting under the table like a magician palming coins, and Aunt Sloane, who had perfected the art of listening only to reply. My napkin was folded into a shape that resembled a bird mid-flight. It felt like a dare. "Before we begin," Patrick said, standing with his glass, a toast to Lena, who has landed a recurring role on a series you'll all pretend you don't binge, but will most certainly binge. "We always knew you had this in you, kiddo." Glasses rose. The room glowed. I lifted mine, the stem cool in my fingers. To Lena, I said and meant it. Success in that industry is a needle threaded in a windstorm. I could hold two truths in one mouth, delight for her, and a tensile thread of something else. "Tell them how it happened," Eliza urged when the clinking died. She sat, her smile framed by lipstick the color of cranberries. Lena performed the chronology with practiced ease, audition, call back again, getting the sides at midnight and learning them by dawn. The director who saw her essence, and the showrunner who kept circling back. She had anecdotes for every beat. A producer had spilled green juice on his sneakers. A cast member had done a British accent so flawless someone applauded between takes. Every detail earned a laugh, a gasp, a hand to the chest. "How many episodes is recurring?" I asked when the room inhaled. 3 guaranteed, she said, lifting her water, "but it could expand if my character tests well." "Which she will." Jonas smiled at that, then glanced at me. "Testing well," he said sotto voce. "If only life had focus groups." "Please don't give my mother ideas," I said. He grinned. Food moved. Compliments moved faster. The pasta sang. The vinaigrette popped. Somewhere between my second and third sip, Eliza disappeared into the sideboard and returned with a small box wrapped in thick paper and ribbon. She set it beside Lena's plate with a little flourish. "What's this?" Lena asked, delighted. "A marker," Eliza said. "A threshold deserves a token." Lena peeled the paper, slowly performing even the unwrapping. Inside, on a bed of gray suede, a watch lay gleaming, mother-of-pearl face, slim band, the kind that says I know what time it is without having to tell you. The kind I had waved away last year when a coworker suggested we celebrate my promotion by buying something nice. I had sent an extra transfer that month when Patrick mentioned the car had made a new sound. If objects had captions, this one would have read, "For the moment you choose to be seen." "Oh," Mom, Lena breathed. "This is..." She searched for the word that wouldn't make gratitude sound like gloating. "Perfect." "We saved for months," Eliza said, then added with an almost casual shrug, "and we've had help when we needed it." Aunt Sloane's eyebrows arched. "That kitchen didn't build itself," she said approvingly. "Someone's bookings must be very healthy." Eliza's mouth tipped. "We have been fortunate," she said. "Lena's been extremely generous." A pause, soft as a handkerchief, drifted over the table. It landed in the place behind my ribs where I kept the ledger. I set my fork down to keep from gripping it hard enough to bend. "Tell me about the set," Theo cut in, oblivious, and the room rolled forward. Jonas reached for the water and refilled my glass without making a thing of it. His sleeve brushed the tablecloth and caught on a thread. He smoothed it. People who see threads and smooth them are rare and not often celebrated here, so Marina Sloane said, turning, "You've always been so, focused. Do you have a special someone to make sure you unclench on the weekends?" She laughed, the way people laugh when they think the line is just close enough to the edge to be cheeky and not cruel. "I have friends who remind me to stop color-coding my calendar," I said easily. "It's frightening for them. Marina dates men who schedule their spontaneity," Lena joked. The table chuckled. "It's adorable." "I like a plan," I said. It came out drier than I meant. Jonas's eyes flicked to mine, sympathetic. "What's wrong with a plan?" Patrick offered a tempting neutrality. "Plans keep houses standing." "Tell me about it," Sloane said. "I told David if we didn't do the floors before winter, we'd regret it." "But yours." "Eliza, gorgeous. The whole first floor is transformed. We finally did the hardwood." Eliza said, a hand sweeping in a small arc of acknowledgement. "And the backsplash, of course." "The old sink was a disgrace." "That sink served us for 20 years, Patrick murmured. "Exactly," Eliza replied. Mia, who had been quiet until she wasn't leaned in. "Lena, how do you juggle the money part?" "LA is wildly expensive, and you've been helping your parents." She sipped wide-eyed, part genuine, part theater. Lena flashed a smile with a bright edge. "You learn to be resourceful," she said. "Commercials pay better than people think, and you cut the right corners." A brief silence fell. Jonas broke it before it thickened. "The structures are rough for early career creatives," he said. "You're building a runway and a plane at the same time." "That's why family is everything," Eliza said, and reached to squeeze Lena's hand. "We're lucky," Blessed Aunt Sloane agreed. "Not everyone has a daughter who steps up." If anyone noticed that Patrick's glass paused mid-air at the word steps, no one said so. The room took a breath and exhaled into a new story about a director who wore only black and communicated in metaphors. I tried to let the talk wash over me, but every detail in the house was louder now. The gleam of the polished floorboards, the exact pendant lights I had Googled once, then closed the tab on. The farmhouse sink I'd heard my mother describe wistfully and then later triumphantly. The bank app in my pocket had dates that matched the grout lines on the backsplash. Marina, Theo said suddenly, "Isn't your job like pointing at graphs and telling people they're wrong?" "On my worst days, that's a fair summary," I said, smiling. "On better ones, it's helping people see risk before it bites, preventing the wrong story from becoming expensive." "Everything is a story with her," Lena said, twirling pasta. "She writes fairy tales for capital. Numbers are a dialect of truth," I said before I could stop myself. "If you listen." Eliza cleared her throat, a small execution, more bread. Patrick stood to refill glasses and nearly knocked over a silver candlestick with his sleeve. He steadied it with the reflexes of a man who has rescued many things at the last second. When he sat, his hand trembled almost imperceptibly. I watched it as one watches a fault line. Jonas asked our father about the magnet school. Patrick warmed briefly, describing senior projects and shy kids who bloomed when given the right problem. Then Lena slid a joke underneath, and the room turned toward her again. It always did. She knew the angles. She had been born understanding where the attention pooled and how to redirect it like light off a mirror. Dessert plates replaced dinner plates, as if there were a conveyor belt under the table. Eliza produced a tart that glowed with glazed berries. "A little sweetness," she announced, "for a new chapter." "I'll eat around the raspberries," Theo said. "I'm allergic to drama." "Then you came to the wrong house, darling," Sloane said, and everyone laughed as if we were in on the joke instead of being the joke. I pushed a berry with my fork and left a small comet tail of juice on the white plate. Lena was telling Jonas about a famous actor who had told her she had presence. Sloane nodded solemnly, as if this were a sacrament, and not a thing famous actors say to every person who interrupts their lunch. "Marina got promoted," Patrick said suddenly, voice gentle but firm, like a hand at the small of your back, guiding you through a crowd. Department head, isn't it? Heads turned, some out of politeness, some with the mild surprise of a person noticing a lamp that has always been in the room. It's a new portfolio, I said. I'm building a team. That's something Eliza said, already turning. Lena, tell them about the producer who asked you to coffee. Jonas cut in, not sharply, but cleanly. Department head is significant, he said. At her age, that's rare. His words landed and made a small crater. Not huge, not permanent, but there. Good for you, Mia said, and meant it, and then picked up her phone again. I pressed my napkin to the berry streak until the stain blurred into a pale pink. When I lifted the cloth, there was no real difference. Absorption disguises. It doesn't erase. From the far end of the table, Uncle Ravi, late to dinner as always, and armed with opinions, tilted his head. I've been wondering, he said to Lena, slightly tipsy curiosity giving him boldness. If work there pays so little as you were saying earlier, how does the math work? LA, rent the travel and helping out here. What's the trick? Eliza frowned at him, but the question sat there as solid as the tart. Ravi Sloan chided too late and without heat. Lena blinked, then smiled. You juggle, she said. And commercial rates are better than people think. National spots can be strong. Jonas offered, carefully neutral. Exactly, Lena said, relief quick. And you know timing. Side gigs. It adds up, Eliza concluded, in the tone of someone closing a ledger that everyone knows doesn't balance, but agrees to stop looking at. Patrick's fork made a quiet, betraying clatter against his plate. I felt it then, not the urge to shout that would be easy and useless, but the shift that happens when a seam finally gives under the weight it has been bearing. Beneath the table, my phone was a flat, indifferent rectangle against my thigh. My spreadsheet brain, that metronome, began to tick. Line items aligned with dates. The backsplash took its place next to the extra car repair transfer. The watch landed in the same column as September's bulk. Jonas's gaze found mine. He didn't nod. He didn't signal. He simply held my look for a beat, and in that beat, I recognized something I rarely recognized at this table witness. Conversation eddied. Eliza asked Sloan about a charity gala. Theo showed Mia a meme. In the corner, the new floor soaked up light like a satisfied cat. A long time ago, I learned the difference between silence that protects and silence that rots. One preserves dignity. The other feeds a story until it owns you. I set my glass down. My fingertips left moons of condensation on the stem. Lena, I began, then stopped, not for effect, but to line up the words so they landed where I aimed them, and nowhere else. The room kept breathing. A fork chimed gently against china. Someone laughed in the living room at a joke from a different conversation. I drew in a slow breath that tasted like berries and basil and thyme. Hey, I said, voice steady. Can I ask you something about... And that was where the night and everything that came after it changed direction. Can I ask you something about the money, I said, shaping the words so they would land on the table and not explode. Conversations drifted toward quiet. Cutlery set itself down. Across the candles, Lena tilted her head, amused at first, then wary. What money? The money that's kept this house floating, I said. When did you start helping with that? Eliza's smile froze a photograph left in the sun. Marina, this is hardly dinner talk. It's precisely dinner talk, Uncle Ravi said, delighted by the scent of a real topic. I've been curious myself. Lena's laugh came out a notch too bright. On and off for years, she said. You know how it is when family needs you, you show up. Around when Dad took the package, I asked evenly. When the district restructured ballpark will do. Eliza placed her napkin beside her plate with surgical care. We're not doing audits at the table. I do audits for a living, I said. This is a question, not an indictment. Jonas watched me the way you watch a tightrope walker ready to help if gravity remembered its job. Sloan sipped and leaned forward, drawn by the same magnet that drew everyone when a surface cracked. Lena's eyes flicked to our parents. Why does it matter when? Because I'd like to reconcile the timeline, I said. Kitchen, floors, the watch, taxes. It helps to know which miracles to think straight. Theo muttered yikes without looking up from his phone. Patrick's hand trembled as he set down his glass. Maybe he began, voice soft. We can save this for when I asked, gentler than I felt. After another round of applause, Eliza inhaled like someone about to dive. You always do this, she said. Turn celebrations into spreadsheets. You've turned spreadsheets into celebrations, I said. I just like the captions to match. Silence spread to the edges of the room. Sloane's bracelet caught a blink of light and went still. "How much do you think you've contributed?" I asked Lena. "A range. 10s, 20s. She stared as if I had asked what her blood type was. "I don't keep tabs on love," she said. "I do," I said, and slid my phone from beneath the edge of the table. My thumb unlocked a small universe. Because that's my job. And because it's been necessary. Eliza's chair scraped it back half an inch. "This is inappropriate. Is it more inappropriate than thanking the wrong child for paying your mortgage?" I asked, and the room seemed to tilt just a little. Jonas's jaw flexed, then loosened. Sloane set her glass down with deliberate quiet. I tapped the banking app, opened the tab labeled Home, and slid the screen across to Ravi because he is both blunt and no one's boyfriend. "Transfers," I said. 6 years. Monthly. Extra when the car coughed. Extra when the fridge died. Extra when the tax bill ballooned. Ravi's eyebrows lifted with each scroll. He isn't a man built for subtleties. 1100, 1214. "Oof," he said softly. "And notes." "I like notes," I said. "They make lies nervous." Lena's face drained and flushed in alternating waves. "What is this, a stunt?" "She looked to our parents for a cue she could copy, Mum." "It's absurd," Eliza said, as if saying it made it so. "Marina is mistaken." "Am I asked, keeping my voice ordinary, the way you speak to a child holding scissors. "Dad." Patrick's eyes closed as if he were bracing for a flash. When he opened them, they were older. He looked at me, then at Lena, and chose the shape of his regret. "It's true," he said, the words coming like coins counted aloud. "She's been helping, more than we ever should have asked." I let it continue because he faltered. His mouth worked as if he needed to borrow a word he didn't own. "Because I was ashamed." Eliza made a small sound, something between a scoff and a wound. "Patrick, you assumed it was Lena," he said to her quietly. "I didn't correct you." For years, Sloane asked, incredulous and fascinated at once. Eliza turned to me with a ferocity that could slice. "You let me believe." "I didn't let you," I said. "You preferred the version with better lighting." Lena pushed her chair back. "So I've been sitting here feeling guilty that I don't do enough, and you—" She shook her head at our parents. "You thanked me for money I never sent in front of people. You sent birthday checks," Eliza said, desperate for purchase. "You were generous." "Birthday checks," Lena repeated, as if the words were a species she didn't recognize. "Mom, you told Aunt Pia I was the reason you could keep the house." Diane Sloane said, gentle as a scalpel, "I have heard you say as much, darling." Eliza's composure cracked like sugar on a creme brulee, clean at first, then collapsing. "I didn't mean... It was just easier to..." She stopped, stranded between the story she curated and the one that had just walked in and sat down at her table. "It was easier to believe the child who performs could also produce the income," I said. It kept the image intact. Jonas's gaze didn't leave Lena. His face was quiet, but not blank. He was doing the math you do when a person you like is rearranged by new information. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Lena asked, and it wasn't vanity, just the sound of a person realizing she'd been cast in the wrong play. "If the house was that close to, why did you let me think I was the hero?" Eliza lifted a hand and let it fall. "Because the other version..." She swallowed. "The other version was unbearable. Unbearable to whom I asked not unkindly, to be helped by the child who doesn't sparkle." Patrick flinched, which was answer enough. Ravi pushed the phone back like it was hot. "Well," he said, "because someone always says well at funerals and weddings and the moment a truth lands. This is consequential." Theo pocketed his phone with a guilty snap, as if he had been recording and then remembered the internet was forever. Mia stared at her plate cheeks, flushed with secondhand heat. Eliza straightened, found a shard of her old certainty and hurled it. "Marina, you have always been so calculating. This is proof. You'd humiliate your sister on her night too." "I'm not humiliating her," I said. "I'm rescuing her from a lie she didn't build. Could we not do this here?" Jonas asked quietly, eyes flicking between us. "Maybe take a breath before anyone says something they can't unsay." But the room was already in that phase where the words have learned to run and are not interested in leashes. "I need air," Lena said, standing so quickly her chair tipped and clipped the edge of the table. Patrick caught it with the reflex of a man who has stabilized tipping things for decades. Lena's napkin slid to the floor like a surrender flag. She didn't pick it up. She walked out toward the back door, shoulders squared and shaking. Eliza followed her footsteps hard on the new floor, the hinges scolding as the door blew open and clapped shut. On the other side of the glass, voices rose too blurred to parse sharp with hurt. The porch light carved their silhouettes into separate islands. In the dining room, the world went too quiet. People remembered suddenly to breathe. Sloane set her fork down with a care that made the gesture louder than a clatter would have been. Ravi poured water he didn't want. Mia, Theo, and 2 cousins invented errands in the living room and vanished. Patrick sat back down, put his elbows on the table, and pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes. For a long breath, he looked like a man taking inventory of the things he'd failed to secure during a storm. "I am sorry," he said to the linen more than to anyone. "This was not how tonight was supposed to go. Most truths prefer unflattering light." Ravi said, not unkind. Patrick glanced at me and winced. "You shouldn't have had to carry that alone." I felt the smallest part of me, some Boy Scout scrap with a merit badge for grace, want to minimize everything. It stood up, and I sat it back down. "I chose to help," I said, but I didn't choose the lie that grew around it. He nodded, that slow, helpless nod of a person who has at last run out of narratives. "I told myself it was temporary," he said. "A bridge. And the longer it lasted, the harder it was to say, we are not what we look like. Your mother, appearance has always been her scaffolding. Lena, we wanted one of you to be rescued by applause." His mouth twitched in something like a smile and failed. "We bet on the wrong engine." Jonas cleared a plate no one had eaten from and stacked it on another busy hands, making a small raft in the middle of the wreck. He didn't speak. The gesture said, "I'm here. I'm not choosing a team, but I am choosing to stay." Sloane exhaled. "Patrick, she said you cannot let one daughter bleed, while the other gets credit for the bandage." "I know," he said, and the knowledge sounded new in his mouth, like a language lesson he would need to practice daily. From the yard, Eliza's voice rose and cracked. Lena's reply broke on it. A glass clinked faintly against the rail. The air smelled like cold and basil and the tart cooling under its gloss. "I should go," I said, my voice suddenly careful. It wasn't escape, it was triage. When structures are failing, you remove excess weight. Patrick looked up stricken. "Please don't." "It's late," I said, "and this isn't a thing solved by keeping people in a room." Ravi stood too, scraping his chair back with a purposeful screech. "I'll play bad cop and shoo the gawkers," he said, jerking his chin toward the living room where the cousins had arranged themselves into a Greek chorus, pretending not to be listening. Sloane touched my arm as she passed a brief press that could have meant apology or solidarity or both. "You did the brave thing," she said quietly. "Brave things are never tidy." Jonas rose when I did. "I'll walk you out," he said, and no one protested, not even the part of me that had been trained to think of accompaniment as indulgence. In the hallway, the house smelled like beeswax and something sweet trying to overcome lemon cleaner. My suitcase waited dutifully under the hall table, a good dog ready to go when called. Jonas lifted it by the handle before I could. "I didn't come to ruin her night," I said as we moved toward the door. "I know," he said. "And for what it's worth, I don't think you ruined it. I think you changed the plot." On the porch, the air bit clean as a new sheet of paper. Voices from the yard curled around the side of the house and thinned in the cold. The stone steps felt more expensive underfoot than wood had. I hated that I knew what they cost. Jonas set the suitcase down one step below me and stood level. "Are you okay?" "No," I said truthfully, "but I am." Relieved that the math is finally spoken out loud. He nodded. "Lena, she will be angry, then embarrassed, then maybe grateful. Not tonight." "I don't need grateful," I said. "I need no more make-believe." He smiled without showing teeth. "You and me both." My phone buzzed in my pocket with the needy persistence of family. I let it buzz. "Will you?" he began, then stopped, choosing how to phrase something that had more than one right answer. "Will you text me when you're home, just so I can stop thinking worst case?" "Jonas," I said, "you barely know me." He tilted his head. "I have met enough budgets to know when something has been starved for too long. You don't fix that with a single meal, but you also don't pretend you didn't see it." A laugh surprised me, small and real. "Okay," I said, "I'll text." We stood there an extra beat, because thresholds are sticky. From inside the dining room murmured into a different key, the sound of people rearranging themselves around a hole. The back door opened and closed again, sharper this time. Eliza swept through the kitchen behind the glass like a weather system, grabbed plates no one had finished, and vanished down the hall. Lena didn't appear. The voices in the yard had stopped. "I'm sorry you had to be at this table for this version," I told Jonas. He glanced toward the window and back. "I think it's the only version that lets any of you eat together again." At the curb, my rideshare idled headlights frosting the cold. Jonas opened the trunk. He lifted the suitcase with an efficiency that did not need to impress me to be kind. "Good night, Marina," he said, and the way he said my name made it sound like something that might in time be allowed to be in the center of a scene. "Good night," I said, and slid into the car. As we pulled away, the house receded into a geometry of warm squares and straight lines. In my lap, the phone lit with a text from Patrick that began, "I'm so sorry," and broke in the middle like his voice does when he is trying not to cry. I didn't answer. Not yet. The road unspooled. The airport signs appeared, then the highway, then the quiet of a city that spends its weekends sleeping off the week. By the time I reached my apartment, the relief had settled into a bruised kind of calm. I put the suitcase by the door, poured water I forgot to drink, and sat in the dark long enough for my eyes to make a map of my own furniture. The phone buzzed again. Lena's name this time, then Eliza's, then an unknown number that turned out to be Jonas. "Just making sure you got in." I typed home, and added, because the future insists on small kindnesses even when the present is on fire. "Thank you for walking me out." A minute later, his reply, "Anytime." I set the phone face down. Outside, a siren stitched the night and faded. Somewhere, a neighbor laughed at a movie I couldn't hear. In the dark, I let myself imagine a version of our family where the mantle held all the right names. Then I turned off the thought gently, like a light you will need again, and went to bed to meet the morning that would ask what comes next. I woke to the kind of quiet that follows a storm. Streets, rinsed sky, undecided. My phone pulsed on the nightstand, missed calls, stacked apologies. A text from Jonas, "Just checking." An hour later, someone knocked with the politeness of a person who isn't sure they're welcome. When I opened the door, Patrick stood there in yesterday's clothes, years heavier than he'd been at the table. "I brought coffee," he said, holding up a paper tray like a flag of truce. At my kitchen table, he turned the lid of his cup without drinking. "I need to say this where you can see my face," he began. "I failed you, not only with the money, with the story I let grow around you." I waited. He filled the quiet. "2 years ago, I had a scare cardiac. We hid it. Your mother holds herself together with appearances, and I let her. The bills I didn't tell you about made everything tighter. When the transfers started, I told myself it was temporary. Then the lie calcified. It was easier to let your mother believe in the glitter version. The glitter version cost all of us," I said. My voice surprised me by not breaking. "I chose to help. I didn't choose to vanish." He nodded once, a long nod. "If you'll let me, I want to help unknot it." My phone rang, Lena's name jittering. I put it on speaker. "How dare you?" she began, breathy with anger and embarrassment. "You detonated my night." "I didn't plan a detonation," I said. But I wasn't going to keep underwriting a script that made me the ghost in my own family. A beat. Then smaller, I didn't know they were telling people that I was the one. Patrick leaned toward the phone. "It's true," he said. "We let that fiction harden because it hurt less than facing the truth. That's on us, not you." Lena exhaled a sound that wasn't quite a sob. "I hate that this is who we were. Can we fix it?" "Not with a single conversation," I said. "But we can start with a real one. Maybe with a professional referee." "Fine," Lena said. "I'll go. Mom will fight it." "She fought it," Patrick said, weary. Then she cried. Then she started Googling counselors. By afternoon, we had an appointment. The therapist's office smelled like citrus and new paper. Dr. Ames had the talent of asking questions that felt like doors instead of traps. We mapped the family we were and the one we pretended to be. Eliza defended the image she'd curated, then saw the cost of polishing everything and everyone. Patrick owned the way his shame had drafted me into silence. Lena admitted she had liked being the poster child, even when the accolades came for things she hadn't done. We left with assignments, name needs without performing them. No money without transparency. Gratitude expressed to the right person in the right amount. I set boundaries. I had rehearsed in my head for years. I would not continue monthly transfers. I would help with a plan, not with a blank check. If we spent money, we would write the truth under it. The discomfort of the new rules scratched us raw for weeks. Eliza slipped and thanked Lena at church for seeing us through a pinch. She called me afterward and apologized before I could. Patrick took on more hours at the community college than a part-time consulting gig for a charter network. He slept better when his ledger started speaking in his voice again. Lena stepped back from the fantasy of overnight stardom and took a job teaching scene study at the Community Arts Center. She found herself leaving class lighter than she'd arrived. Her casting calls didn't stop, but they stopped owning her. Jonas and Lena lasted exactly 2 more honest conversations. They parted with more relief than tears and unexpectedly humor. He and I began walking after our group sessions, the long kind of walk where you edit yourself less with each block. We did not name it. We let it grow at the pace of truth. 6 months later, the same table that had hosted the rupture held something quieter. Fewer centerpieces, more eye contact. When we were seated, Patrick raised his glass. The tremor that used to skip under his skin had calmed. To the messy kind of honesty he said that lets us keep sitting down together, Eliza lifted hers. And to Marina, she said finding my name like a step she had avoided, and now could take for keeping our house and this family above water. I can't undo the years I didn't see you. I can only say I see you now. Her voice wobbled on the last word but stayed. There were no exclamation points. Sloane squeezed my shoulder. Ravi nodded like a man who loves conclusions more than beginnings. After dinner, Eliza disappeared and returned with a small package. "For you," she said. Inside lay a silver frame. Behind the glass, my graduate diploma, the one I'd once entrusted to their attic. The paper was crisp. My name looked like it belonged to me. "It goes over the mantel," she said, "between Dad's commendation and Lena's festival award." We hung it together. It did not write the past. It did mark the present. On the porch later, Jonas and I waited for the evening to thin. "Regrets?" he asked. About the transfers, I watched the windows warm and cool as people moved through rooms. I regret the secrecy, not the help. Care needs air. We were suffocating it. He slipped his hand into mine like a question asked correctly. "Then here's to more air." The months weren't suddenly saintly. Old reflexes knocked. Sometimes we let them in for 5 minutes before escorting them out. But the new pattern held problems named before they metastasized. Praise properly addressed. Money written down in a ledger that matched the life it was buying. At the end of the year, Eliza closed the books on her first steady months working the floor at a design store and surprised me by loving the ordinary pride of showing up. Patrick let me rebalance his retirement account without performing guilt. Lena invited me to watch a class, and I saw the things she did that no lighting could fake one sentence to a shy teenager, and the girl opened like a window. On the way out, Lena bumped my shoulder. "I used to think value was applause," she said. "Turns out it's attention. You've been giving us the right kind all along." I didn't correct her. I just let the line land and settle. Back at my apartment, I stood the silver frame on a shelf. It threw a soft rectangle of light onto the wall. The room looked slightly different with my name in it. Not brighter. Truer. Care, it turns out, doesn't ask for thanks. It asks for daylight, for boundaries, for the right story written under the numbers. We weren't perfect at any of it. We were better than we had been. And on most nights, that was enough to keep the table set. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.